What's going on, gang? Welcome back to the channel. Week 1 of the NFL is officially in the books. I had a fantastic week on PrizePicks. Not only that, but I went 5-0 in my season-long fantasy football leagues as well. So I'd have to say week 1 overall for me was a success, and hopefully it was a success for you as well. If this is your first time to the channel, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a like on this video. We're going for at least 30 likes on today's video. I'm taking the over on 30. You guys have crushed the likes so far this NFL season, and for that, I thank you so much. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Thursday night football game for the New York Giants versus the Washington football team, seeing what props we like early on here. Just a general overview. We're going to buzz through the passing yards, the rushing yards, the receiving yards, and the receptions over on PrizePicks. Now, speaking of PrizePicks, if you don't play yet, I don't know why not, because it is the #1 way for me to play daily fantasy sports now. It's real simple. You just pick anywhere from 2, 3, 4 to 5 players, the overs, the unders, whatever you're feeling, and that's it. You lock in however much you want to play, and you hit submit. It's as easy as that. Now, if you don't play yet, you can get a 100% instant deposit match. That's double your money for free by using promo code Curry on your first deposit at PrizePicks.com. Not only that, but if you're looking to join a community where we're talking all things PrizePicks and you need a little bit of help, bounce some ideas off of other people, I'm giving you your first month of Patreon for free if you deposit on PrizePicks using promo code Curry. So all you do is go to PrizePicks.com, use promo code Curry, drop in at least 20 bucks all the way up to $100, however much you want. Then you go to Patreon, you sign up for the Patreon group, which gets you access to Discord, where we're talking about NFL and all the different sports that they play over on PrizePicks. And I'll give you your first month of Patreon for free, so you can kind of check out the community, see what you like, what you don't like about it. You know, maybe you stay, maybe you don't. But anyway, that's my free offer to you, and hopefully you take advantage of it. Now, not to mention, my favorite tools this season are going to be powered by the Blitz. As far as predictive tools go, it gets no better, honestly. I love what I've been seeing so far with the Blitz. In case you haven't heard, I use the Bat for all my MLB needs. The Blitz by Derek Carty has been great so far. I mean, they have everything you could want here. Standard projections, injury reports, game level factors, so you can start kind of game scripting how you think a game could possibly play out due to, you know, where they're playing and so on and so forth. They've got GPP stuff for DK, FanDuel if you play on any of those sites that require salary cap. I personally don't, but anyway, everything you want for daily fantasy sports is there in the Blitz. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at this game real quick. We got the New York Giants at the Washington football team. The implied total is 41 points with a 3-point spread. We're looking at Washington as 3-point favorites at home. Of course, this game kicks off Thursday night at 8:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you kind of have an idea now. It's going to be a low-scoring game, but it should be a competitive one with just a 3-point spread. Let's look at some of the injuries, because there are some significant ones that we should consider. Antonio Gibson, he has a bruised shoulder. He got a little bit beat up on Sunday. He's questionable, so that's one to definitely keep an eye on. Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to miss some time for the Washington football team. He is out with a hip injury, so that means Tyler Heinicke is going to be stepping in. Then we got Curtis Samuel. He's also going to miss some time for Washington. He's going to be out multiple weeks, did not play on Sunday. Evan Ingram is one that we need to keep an eye out on, because if he plays, that could shake things up for the New York Giants quite a bit in terms of target shares, especially when you're talking Kyle Rudolph, who was actually targeted quite a bit, surprisingly. So he's questionable to play at this moment. So keep an eye on injury news as we get closer to that game. So with that stuff out of the way, let's take a look at some of the props and see which ones we're liking and which ones we're not. We're going to go through the New York Giants side of things first, starting with Daniel Jones, who's at 231 passing yards. For that, let's go back to his week 1 matchup against the Denver Broncos, who are a pretty good team, pretty tough defense. Daniel Jones ended up throwing the ball 37 times, completing 22 of those passes for 267 yards and 1 touchdown. So the over would have hit here with his 267 yards at a projection of just 231.5. Of course, Saquon Barkley being beat up doesn't help. That means Daniel Jones is going to have to shoulder more of the load. He can't turn around and hand it off to his superstar tailback as much. So the over would be kind of a way that I think I would be leaning for Daniel Jones, especially if you saw how many passing yards Washington gave up to Justin Herbert in week 1. So Daniel Jones over passing yards looking pretty good for me. Now let's move over to the rushing side of things for New York. We got Daniel Jones again at 22.5. Now surprisingly, he did rush for quite a few rushing yards here. 6 carries for 27 yards and a rushing touchdown. His 6 carries were second most on the team, only behind Barkley with 10, and his 27 rushing yards actually led the team in rushing, surprisingly. So pretty tough defense in the Denver Broncos. It's not going to get any easier for Daniel Jones this week against Washington. So could I see him rushing for 23 or more yards? With Saquon Barkley beat up, yeah, I think I actually could see him going over. Like I said, this is going to be a situation where Daniel Jones is going to just have to shoulder more of the load, both passing and rushing. Which brings us to the aforementioned Saquon Barkley, 52.5 rushing yards. I'll be honest with you, Saquon did not have a good game against Denver. Let's go take a look at his numbers. Ended up with 10 carries for 26 yards. That's a 2.6 yards per carry average. His longest run of the day was just 5 yards. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, you can see that as far as receiving goes, he caught one pass for 1 yard, and it was just a 1 yard gain there, and he was targeted 3 times. So Saquon, not very involved, as the New York Giants tend to ease him in a little slowly. This is a quick turnaround for Barkley and company, so I don't expect him to have a heavy workload all of a sudden just a few days after his debut in week 1. Now we can look at the snap count here to give you a better idea of how things went for this New York Giants backfield. You could see that Saquon Barkley listed as the number 1 running back for New York. No surprise there. Devontae Booker, the number 2 running back for New York. Excuse me. Barkley ended up with 29 snaps. Devontae Booker ended up with 24 snaps. Barkley, 47% of the snap share, with Booker right behind him at 39% of the snap share. So wouldn't call it an even split, but darn it, it was pretty close. So got to be careful with taking any overs on Saquon Barkley here. Washington, tough defense. I would be leaning toward the under most likely on Saquon personally. I just don't think he's ready yet. I don't think he's 100%. I don't think he gets a heavy workload. So the receiving side of things, we've got a few different pass catching options here for receiving yards on the New York Giants side of things, starting with Sterling Shepard, who was the number 1 most targeted receiver for New York. Then we got Kenny Golladay at 49.5, Darius Slayton 44.5, and Kyle Rudolph at 13.5. Now, as I mentioned before, you're going to have to be careful here. Look out for the Evan Ingram news, because if he's out on the field, he will be involved. He's one of Daniel Jones's top pass catchers when healthy. When healthy, that's the key word. So let's take a look at how things broke out here for the Giants. You can see that Sterling Shepard again led the way. 9 targets, ended up pulling in 7 of those targets for 113 yards and a touchdown. Big game for him. Darius Slayton, second on the team in targets with 7, ended up pulling in 3 of those targets for 65 yards. And then finally, Kenny Golladay, 6 targets, pulled in 4 for 64 yards. And then Kyle Rudolph was the 4th most targeted receiver with 5 targets, 2 catches, and 8 yards. So you can kind of see how things were divided up, split up in terms of targets. And then he has, just a myriad of different other receiving options. But those are the top 4 guys that you should be looking out for. And again, pay attention to the Evan Ingram news. So if Sterling Shepard again leads this team in targets, then I think that this is a situation where he could potentially go over 62.5. But I think I'm looking more at Kenny Golladay and Darius Slayton here, as those targets were pretty high for both guys. And I think these numbers, 49.5 receiving yards and 44.5 receiving yards, represent a little bit of value here, opposed to Sterling Shepard. Now, Kyle Rudolph at 13.5, really, I'm not going to touch him until I get more Evan Ingram news. So all the Kyle Rudolph props, it's really going to hinge on Evan Ingram for me and if he plays or not. So that brings us to the final single stat player prop category, and we're talking Sterling Shepard at 5 receptions, Kenny Golladay at 4. So let's head back to week 1 and see how those things shook out. Sterling Shepard would have went over. Kenny Golladay would have been a push. Again, we have to operate off of just knowing that this is a small sample size. This is 1 week that we saw these guys all out there. So will the things shake out the same again? I mean, I don't know. We have to wait and see. Only time will tell. But if things go the way that they look like they're going, then I would probably take the over on Sterling Shepard, Kenny Galladay. I would lean toward the over. I think that worst case it ends up as a push with 4 receptions for Kenny Galladay. So let's hit the rewind button. We'll do this again, but going on the Washington side of things here, let me close out some of these tabs to keep things nice and tidy. We're starting things off with Taylor Heinicke at 239.5 passing yards. Now, this one is a big question mark for me because obviously he did not play a full game. He came in, early in the game, but it definitely wasn't a full workload for him. He ended up dropping back 15 times, completing 11 passes, so pretty good completion percentage, 122 yards and a touchdown. It's going to be tough to tell how much Washington actually passes. I think some of it's going to depend on if Antonio Gibson's completely healthy or not. I told you he's mending on the mend of a bruised shoulder, so will they give it to him 20 times again and keep a more grounded attack, or will they let Heinicke throw it through the air as much as he wants to? That is one that remains to be seen. So for that reason, probably going to fade this guy just because we don't have enough info on him. He has had some big games, good games in the past, but don't know that I'm particularly interested in going over or under on him, to be honest. So let's move things over to his rushing numbers. He's at 19.5 rushing yards. If we go back to that game, Chargers versus Washington, you could see that he actually had 3 carries for 17 yards, was number 2 behind Antonio Gibson in total rushing yards and total carries. So kind of interesting, had a 9-yard scramble that made up much of that 17 yards rushing. So at 19.5, I don't know. Do I feel great about it? Probably not. I'm probably just going to fade this guy altogether, to be honest with you. Which brings us to Antonio Gibson at 65.5. That represents a pretty good value in my opinion, especially if he does get the 20 carries like he got last week. 20 carries, 90 yards is where he ended up. If he gets a workload like that again, then I'm absolutely hitting the over on this 65.5 rushing yard prop. But you got to stay tuned, you got to pay attention, stay plugged into the news on him. I don't know if he gets 20 carries again if he's nursing a bum shoulder. So this would be one that I would still lean toward the over on, but with less confidence being that he's a little bit banged up. So let's move it over to the receiving yards. We got Antonio Gibson at 16.5 receiving yards. Believe it or not, he was actually the most targeted player on the Washington football team. So let's go take a look at those numbers real quick and see how the targets were divvied out. You can see the number 1 leader in targets was Antonio Gibson. He was targeted 5 times, followed by Terry McLaurin at 4. And then you've got Logan Thomas at 3 and Adam Humphries at 2. And Dyami Brown was targeted 4 times, but did not do very well on those 4 targets, hauling in just 1 catch for -2 yards. So going back to the receiving yards, if Antonio Gibson gets targeted like that again, I'd probably lean toward the over on him. Terry McLaurin had 1 big play of 30+ yards that made up a big portion of his total receiving yards on the day, which ended up being 62. You can see he caught a 34-yard pass. I expect him to get targeted more than just 4 times. They're going to have to get him and Logan Thomas the ball more, so I'm expecting that to happen. So I would be looking to take overs on maybe McLaurin and Logan Thomas. I'd feel most comfortable about those 2 guys. Maybe an under on Dyami Brown, as he was targeted 4 times, hauled in just 1, as you saw, for negative yardage. And then Adam Humphries was targeted, I believe, just 2 times. Let's go take a look at that. Yep, 2 targets, 2 receptions, just 10 yards. So it's going to be tough to tell how Washington approaches this game. Are they going to be throwing it a lot more? Are they going to be more of a balanced attack? I don't know. It remains to be seen. But I'd be feeling better about the top 3 guys, Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin, and Logan Thomas, if I'm taking overs on any of them. Now, in terms of receptions, we've got 4 different options, 4 different ways to go here. McLaurin at 5.5. I told you earlier he was targeted 4 times, so that would have been an under on this 5.5 number, but I do think they need to get him the ball more in week 2, so I could see this number going up. Maybe 6 is a little too high. Remains to be seen, but the Dyami Brown 2.5 receptions, I'd be taking the under. He was targeted 4 times, but only hauled in 1. I probably would lean toward the under on him. Humphries at 2, I could see that being a push. And then Logan Thomas at 4. I like that over. I think at worst case, this ends up being a push as well. 4 receptions or more seems doable for Logan Thomas. But that's going to do it for today's video. Just a brief overview of all the props that they have up on PrizePicks. Again, don't forget to subscribe, turn notifications on, like this video if it helped you out, and go sign up on PrizePicks if you haven't yet. Promo code Curry, free money giveaway, double your first deposit. Thank you so much for watching, guys. We'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.